In these primary elections across 6 states, Democrats argue they got momentum and they're unifying around these nominees. Now let's take a look at the top of the show at how it unfolded in real time across the primary election night.
It is election night in America once again.
The Associated Press has just projected that Amy Klobuchar will be the Democratic candidate for governor.
Darlene Graham will advance to a runoff.
This is a very emotional night.
Wisconsin, we have built something that will change politics forever.
And we're not going to give up this race until the votes are counted. That's nonsense.
This campaign was about the many versus the money.
Tom Tiffany stood with those who tried to overturn a free and fair presidential election instead of defending our democracy.
Well, guess what? The many just won.
There you go. You kind of get a little excited, feel like people are really voting, things are happening. I can tell you a lot of Democrats were studying the Wisconsin governor's primary, where voters made David Crowley the Democratic nominee. Now, he's a 40-year-old city official, a member of the ACLU and NAACP, who in most years might seem like a pretty standard Democratic option. But as these years' primaries have featured energized and often victorious Democratic socialists, Crowley's new win after trailing in the polls is being covered by some as a kind of rebuttal to the left, a stunning loss for his more liberal opponent, as the Times put it today. Now, that is ideology. On electability, nonpartisan experts view Crowley as the stronger choice for the Democrats to win, one forecaster shifting that race to the Democrats now that Crowley is the nominee. He had trailed by many points in some polls, and some in the political media are rushing to argue this must be a wider trend. Axios interprets the race as a sign that socialist fever is breaking, that the center-left wing of the party could make a comeback now. Well, many of those reactions are basically narratives hunting for data. You know I keep it real with you here on The Beat, at least I try to. And the fact is, we won't know much about what all national voters want in the midterms until the midterms are held this November. What we know about Democratic primaries is there is at least now room and certainly a receptive sort of public mindset within Democratic voters for economic populists and for actual Democratic socialists. Voters just showed that in Michigan, which is not exactly left of Vermont or California generally. And if you just broaden out even beyond our certain kind of MAGA-infested era, 20 years ago, New York was run by a centrist billionaire, known above all else for his business career. Today, it's run by a Democratic socialist. Just as New York's district crossing the Bronx and Queens, which is kind of a working-class Democratic enclave, was then 20 years ago led by the establishment Democrat Joe Crowley. Now it's repped by the most prominent Democratic socialist in Congress, AOC. And so positions that were once almost disqualifying among Democrats in most part of the country are certainly now allowed. They're on the table. Sometimes they are rewarded. Now, even as Wisconsin Democrats swung back to this traditional option last night, their nominee will face Tom Tiffany, a MAGA Republican who voted in Congress against certifying Joe Biden's win, the same day that MAGA fans infamously stormed the Capitol in their crime spree. And I mentioned that because that mainlining of the anti-democracy movement from legal steps, in other words, members of Congress can vote to overturn an election and vote not to certify what their own constituents did. That is a legal option, albeit anti-democratic. There are also, of course, the related MAGA criminal plots to pursue that same effort, overthrowing elections by force. Now, that was on display last night and today because the fringe Trump ally Mike Lindell, who runs the company MyPillow, lost in Minnesota but won't concede. He's complaining about vague irregularities, but he's stoking division among Republicans because this was his primary loss. And the GOP again is finding that Trump's playbook may begin by targeting certain liberal opponents, but it is soon deployed against fellow Republicans. It is one of the obvious and yet slowly learned lessons of this MAGA era. Just as Trump's DOJ abuse, which we're documenting here, also includes targeting Republicans on the Fed, all the way out to his own former cabinet officials. As for the politics, Lindell's loss is the third for Trump endorsees in just the last 2 weeks alone. So that's a lot to chew on, but we have some politically hungry guests here at the table. Molly Jong-Fast, a contributing writer with the New York Times, MS Now analyst, host of the Fast Politics podcast, and Sam Seder, political commentator who hosts the very popular Majority Report on YouTube. It's netted over 1 billion views, and he's interviewed major people like the Congresswoman I just mentioned, AOC, Senator Bernie Sanders, who we had on within the last day. You see him right there. Sam is actually interesting as someone that a lot of our viewers know from being around what we might call the liberal media, if you will. Yes. But you're also now a digital innovator at a time where some are waking up to the power of that. So I want to get into that with you. Sure. But Molly, let's start with what we did learn last night. Maybe not as much as the headlines say, but a time of Democratic unity, according to at least their spokespeople.
I really like that package you played at the beginning, because I think that this is a narrative that is looking for facts, a framing that doesn't necessarily fit. And if you look at these candidates, what you see is voters really voted for candidate quality. They voted for candidates they thought could win. It wasn't straight down ideological. Certainly, they wanted candidates who were offering them something, who came out as fighters, but they weren't. I just think it's too simple. And in fact, the other thing that, that I think is really important when you look at the top lines of this primary is that in the Wisconsin primary, I happen to have these numbers here very nerdily, 791K approximately Democratic voters versus 490K Republican voters. So there was a big Democratic many more Democratic primary voters in Wisconsin. And in the Minnesota Senate primary, which is another one where you had multiple candidates on the ballot, but still, Democrats 697 versus GOP 406.
Yeah. Sam, I turn to you to transcend the narrative.
Sure.
Rather than succumb to it.
I actually think this narrative is pretty low bar to transcend. Those numbers, I would add that Francesca Hong got the second largest amount of votes in a Democratic primary in the 20th century. The first, of course, being Crowley last night. So, I mean, the turnout was incredible. And I think the idea that this is somehow a resurgence of moderates. Look, this is a very contested state. The past 3 or 4 elections, short of Obama, were decided by 30,000 votes in Biden's favor one time and Trump's a couple of times. And so I think the electorate is very sensitive to the idea of who can win. And I think that narrative took hold where voters became more pundits than they did voting for what they necessarily wanted.
And and in agreement, or in addition to that, is it also possible that having 2 strong viewed candidates brought out more people?
Oh, without a doubt. And I mean, I think that's what happened. And I think, there could have been some Republican crossover. It's an open primary. But and I don't think, Hong is necessarily a top tier performer on television as some of someone like Abdul El-Sayed is, but she's an amazing organizer. And what's built in that state now is an incredible infrastructure,
which she referred to last night.
Which I think
say a little more about that, because not everyone's in the weeds on Wisconsin.
The difference between when you talk about the so-called moderates and folks like DSA or more economic populists, they're winning with less money. I mean, race after race, they're winning or coming very, very close with less money, and that's because the nature of their politics is such that organizing and getting people involved is consistent with their ideology in a way that moderate politicians don't necessarily subscribe to. They get funding from outside sources. They get a lot more PAC money. They'll go up on TV more. But when you get politicians who are more oriented towards an economic populism, you see organizing on the ground. And that organizing doesn't go away.
Right.
That continues. So we're going to see down ballot victories in a state like Wisconsin 2 years from now, 4 years from now. We're going to see more and more, I think, whether it's DSA, whether it's, progressives. I think we're going to see a lot more of this. These organizations don't go away.
And you're making a fair point. Also, they say, necessity is the mother of invention, right? Well, being an independent progressive who's critical of capitalism, whether that's DSA or a little less, is the mother of having to build a grassroots organization because there's no out-of-state banks coming to help you.
Right, exactly. I mean, it's both necessity, but it's also it is almost an essential to the ideology of their politics. So it's not just...
Molly has a butt.
I would just add that Ben Wickler, like the state chair of Wisconsin, was very, very good. So it wasn't like they were starting from nothing. There was some infrastructure there that he had done. I mean, I agree. And what Hong has done is amazing. She did these huge town halls and she had, a huge army of door knockers, which she has said she is now going to bring with her, which is the dream, which is the best any Democratic candidate can do for another. But I just think Ben was.
I want to jump in and show what Bernie was talking to you about, because you had a newsworthy interview. Okay. And as I mentioned, you got a lot of folks watching you online. Democrats, some are late to this. They're trying to figure this out. You've been doing this. And Bernie was also talking about the anger, which isn't just at Trump. It is also at the whole broken system. Let's take a look at what you guys talked about.
My thought, Sam, is that all over this country, and we're seeing this in New York City, New Jersey, Arizona, Colorado, Pennsylvania, Montana, et cetera, there is profound anger and disgust with status quo politics and status quo politicians. People want change.
Well, first off, I want to say, you see, I wore a sport coat for you tonight. You
dressed up.
I dressed up a little
for the beat. We love it.
Yeah, no, I think, listen, this has been the case for, I think, a long time.